Welcome to Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria James, and today I am excited to have with us author Poonam Bhuchar, the author of Safe from the Pain. Welcome, Poonam.
Hello, welcome, Poonam. It's so wonderful to have you on Read This, and I am so excited about your book. I enjoyed reading it, and just the name says a world of information that's there. It was so moving. But before we get into the meat of the book, I would love for the audience to learn a little bit about you. Would you mind sharing?
Sure. Alex, it's such a pleasure. Alice, it's such a pleasure to be on, and I appreciate the opportunity. So, my name is Poonam Bhuchar. I've basically been a corporate immigration attorney and family law lawyer for about 24 years. As of last year, I made a career change. As I wrote this book, it was published in the early part of 2022. And I'm sure we all have an element of the negative chatter in our brain, I started to tell my story, and people were just like, who saw me back in 2008 to 12 were like, well, how did you get from there to where you are today? So I started to really think about it, and it was this SAFE method that I've devised, which I'm sure we'll discuss later. But in hearing, my whole purpose of writing this book was that if I could stop one person from feeling the way that I did, or if I could help one person and validate the way that they're feeling the way I did, then my job is done. And when I put the book out, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not a writer. This is just going to be nonsense. But I can't tell you how moved I was by the amount of people that came out of the woodworks. I had friends from high school that I'd lost touch with who wrote me 5-6-page letters about what they've been through in their lives, and how just reading the book helped them think about how to process their pain or really look at themselves. And then when I started to see this, I was like, well, okay, I love being a lawyer. I love what I do. And I've also seen trauma through dealing with people's divorces, or people with immigration who can't get the right paperwork. And I've been through my own trauma. And I was like, I want to combine my legal skills, my professional skills, and my personal skills to start talking to people about the importance, not just of self-care, but holding yourself accountable for your emotional well-being. There's so much out there with regards to corporate burnout, and the companies can provide us with all the resources that they want. But if we're not doing the work and we don't take advantage of those resources, or we just shut it down, then we're not doing the work that we're supposed to. And then we lead into what I call generational trauma. And that's why I literally switched careers a year ago, because for me, this is a passion, and I believe it's what I'm here to do, to try and stop and help people heal and stop us from continuing this generational trauma that is going on.
Well, yeah, there is a lot of generational trauma. And I could say that because I'm 60. So I grew up with, you work hard and the companies are going to support you and you're going to be there for you. And you grow up with that understanding that you're supposed to grind. So I have a lot of respect for the younger generation that has seen that didn't work for their parents and said, oh, no, I'm not going to get caught on that wheel. So yes, there is that trauma, because there are a lot of parents that are still passing that way of thinking down to their children. And it is not healthy. That's the heart attacks. That's the strokes. That's the autoimmune diseases, right? I'm so anxious to jump into the book. There's a few things that I would love to compliment you about on your book that I generally love and appreciate how you tackled it. One was the care and the admiration that you gave your parents. You know, quite often I see people talk about the things of their culture and the generations before them, and they don't give any empathy or compassion to the fact that that's all they knew. You know, sometimes you can't teach, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you can't really teach something different if you don't know it yourself. So you gave a lot of care and compassion to your parents.
You've got me in tears now. Thank you.
To their experience, which was, I loved. It was brilliant. It was very compassionate. And also, the book wasn't an indictment on your culture. It was really like, okay, it's almost felt like it's time to evolve. We can take the good, we can look at the bad, and we can evolve into something better. And that is what I got from your book. So
I really appreciate that, because I think I've been on so many podcasts, but you're the first person that has actually taken that out of the book, which was something that I was so conscious of doing, because I am proud of my heritage, which is Indian. I am proud to be Indian. I was born and raised in London, and I am of Indian heritage, and I'm proud of it. And I don't think the subjects that I spoke about are specific to the Indian culture. Maybe the way that they were dealt with to a certain degree may have been. But I also, in being a single mom, raising two kids for 17 years, I can't knock two parents who left a country at a very young age, came into a country where they had to learn everything from scratch, who built a life and their only goal in life was to educate us. They didn't have any babysitters. They didn't have any families. They worked extremely hard to provide the things that they did. And when you're doing that, taking care of emotional well-being or seeing things that you don't have the time to see, I cannot sit here and fault them for that.
Right. And you didn't. You did a beautiful job of holding them up, showing the love and compassion that they had for you, showing that they had their own struggles, and they did the best that they could with the resources, the knowledge, and the understanding that they had. So I wanted to give you kudos for that, because to me, that means the world, because there are so many times when the least little thing that goes wrong, people want us to, I'm Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica. They want us to, like, throw, for lack of a better expression, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Your whole culture goes out because it's not perfect, and that's not necessary. There are things that might need to change or be adjusted, but you could still be proud of who you are, where you're from. You can embrace your culture and still grow and still allow things to change.
I think, Alex, you brought up a really good point, because this was an evolution for me. I was very angry at my parents, but with kindness, compassion to yourself and to other people, you learn to step into their shoes. But I think you bring up a very important point that if we all start to reject our cultures, how does that evolve? How do we teach the second generation or the third or the fourth? My kids are the third generation. How do you teach that generation that it's okay to be proud of our culture, but we evolve within it and we make it better as individuals?
Yes.
By rejecting it, we're not making a change.
I love how the first part of the book was about the pain, and you brought us through that journey, and then you taught us how to heal from the pain. So for me, that takes a lot of courage and passion to be that vulnerable and that transparent. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you did it?
So I think, as I said, I think this was a soul calling. So for me, so did I feel brave putting it out there? No, it was my story. Was I worried as a corporate attorney, like what my clients and everybody would think? And I know, some of my family members and friends were like, are you sure you want to put this all out there? And I said, yeah, because I also bring that compassion in my practice. And if my clients will get behind it, which they did. So the pain that I've shared is that when I was 13 years old, I was sexually assaulted in high school. And it was a very public thing. It was in London. It was a very public thing. And literally, it's not something I could have spoken to my parents about. 2-3 days into it, I started to get bullied, saying that I deserved it, I didn't stop it. And you're already going through your emotional trauma, and then you hear that, and it just started escalating. More and more of the school started to find out about it. I felt humiliated and just sick to my stomach. I would go home, and because I wasn't able to speak about it, nobody really figured out what was wrong with me, and I was great at hiding. I was leading 2 different lives. And I've probably done that for about 4 decades. And literally, it became too much. I attempted to commit suicide. And obviously, I failed because I'm still here. Not to make light of anybody that does it, but it adds to the fact that I'm here for a reason. And again, right, I went to 1 or 2 sessions of therapy, and my parents had to get to work. They didn't know much better. And literally, I went from an all-girls school there, which was the best thing that ever happened to me because I never felt like I couldn't do anything. Thereafter, the shame, the guilt, and the absolute detest that I had for myself just kept growing and growing and growing. Ironically, I knew at the age of 13 that I wanted to be a lawyer, and it's taken me all these years to understand. Perhaps it was because I didn't have a voice, and I shoved that pain so far down that I wanted to be a voice for other people. I hated myself so much, but I knew that culturally I was expected to have an arranged marriage, and everything I was groomed to do, studying, everything was to have a good family and marry into a good family. So it's not that my parents held a gun to me. It was, well, here's a proposal. It's in the United States. Would you consider it? I flew out. I did share with my person that I was getting engaged to my history, even though my parents at that point did know. And he was like, fine, but there was something in the pit of my stomach that was telling me that this marriage is not right. There is something not right about this. And fast forward 8 months later, I got married. I moved to the US at the age of 21. It was a physically and verbal abusive marriage on many levels. I did complete my law school here, which was great. I stayed married for 13 years, and I had a 4- and 6-year-old at the time. And when I started to see the trajectory of this marriage and the impact it could possibly have on the kids, I was like, I need to get out. Now, none of us are perfect in any marriage, right? I was angry at what was going on. I wouldn't tell my family the full extent of what was going on. My parents would hear some of it and say, oh, everybody has marital issues. Just, it will work out. It will work out. But because I was so far away from them, I didn't want to tell them about it. So from there, because I was so confused and I was just in a fog, I didn't know who I was at the age of 34 when I got divorced. Most people would, well, you'd hope, spend the time trying to heal themselves. I had a 4 and 6-year-old, no family here. What did I do? I jumped into another marriage 2 years later.
Not just your culture, but culture in general teaches women that that's our value, right? Is having a partner and having a failed marriage, and now you don't have a partner. So I could see where that kind of doubled down on your low self-esteem. So
because you view every bit. First of all, I came from a culture of 17, 18 years ago when very few people were getting divorced. Right. I had 2 young kids. I was being judged. And you automatically think, for the sake of your kids, I'm not enough. So let me bring somebody else on board who, again, the whole world was telling me, don't marry, but I did. And that barely lasted 3 months because, again, I'd attracted who I was, the low self-esteem, the low everything. I fully understand that phrase now. You attract who you are. Yes. And from there onwards, I just wasn't thinking clearly. I made a multitude of decisions coming from a platform of low self-worth, which led to losing a business, losing a home, having to rebuild my life back in 2012, to fast forward 2016, 17. I'd started a law practice in 2012 again, and 2017, 18, I'd merged. I had done well enough that a medium-sized firm asked me to merge with them. And then I did that. And then I won a bunch of awards for being a lawyer and stuff like that. But I'd suffered so much that my physical well-being at the age of 38 had taken on a serious downturn. I had 2 strokes, a spinal tap. I suffered from fibromyalgia, or I ignored it. I was depressed. So me not taking care of my emotional well-being led to a downward spiral for at least a decade of my life.
Yeah. People really don't understand how trauma and stress really impact our bodies, right? Everything is so interconnected. And one of the things I appreciated in reading your book is the fact that you recognize so clearly how you refuse to follow your intuition. And the earlier you saw the journey of you totally ignoring your intuition because of culture, environmental pressures, and everything that you had knowledge that you were supposed to do. So you ignored. You can do all of those things and do them in alignment with your intuition, but because of your self-esteem and because you didn't really know what your purpose was beside all these requirements, educated wife, mother, so you tap down your intuition every single time they welled up. And I enjoyed watching you start to recognize in your stories that I need to start listening to my intuition. So for me, that's a huge part of my being, like if it doesn't feel right in my gut, I'm late. Now, did that come through meditation, or did that come through the fact that you recognize that I have always been warned and I just haven't listened?
I've always been warned, and I think I think we're not taught to listen to it, especially as women and cultural women. We're taught to please the whole world, to please society, to live up to expectations. And somewhere ingrained in us, we're also taught inadvertently, not that somebody says this to us, but we're inadvertently taught that to listen to ourselves or think of ourselves is selfish, which is actually the other way around. And through meditation, I have taught myself to listen to myself. And I completely agree with you. The whole world could be telling me to go left. If my intuition's saying right and I'm the only one doing it, I'm going to go right. I've trained myself so much to know that I'm going to listen to my gut. And I think the universe is always speaking to us, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it. But we choose not to listen because we don't know who we are. And when we don't know who we are, we're too busy living up to society's expectations and what other people want of us, especially as women. We're people pleasers.
Yeah, I grew up knowing how to listen to my intuition. It was something that like my dad taught me. It's like, because being female, he always said, and he grew up with sisters, right? He said he always told his sisters, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If you don't feel safe in a place, get out of there. So I knew those principles. But then there was a space in my 20s where I was working really hard, trying to become successful. And, these were the rules. Like, it's almost like you follow intuition or you follow rules. Sometimes they don't work hand in hand. Right. And I started following these rules. And I remember the day I actually said my intuition left me. I had my real estate license and I was scheduled to take some other agents on an appointment. In my gut, I felt like there was going to be a car accident and I refused to drive. And I am the most optimistic person you ever wanted to meet, right? And everybody knew that. But on that day, they were like, oh, you're being negative. And I'm like, I'm never being negative. And I remember the broker getting really angry with me because I literally refused to do it. So he said, well, I'll drive everybody, but then you got to take an appointment. So he got in the car and he was driving. He was driving really badly because he was angry. And we got into a quick little fender bender. He goes, oh, there's your big accident, right? And by this time, I'm in the car and I'm like shaking like a leaf on the tree. Everything in me knows there's something bad's going to happen. And about 10 minutes later, we got into a 7-car accident. We were the first car. The front of a livery car in New York City hit the front of our car, totaled the car. I'm watching the car come towards my front door, my door. Oh my gosh. And I just knew that was going to be the end, but it hit the front of the car instead of the door. Had it hit the door, I probably wouldn't be here. And that was the last time for years I got any kind of warning. No warning. That shut down, that not listening shut down the intuition to the point that I knew it was shut down, And then when I started listening again, when I got off of that treadmill of success and kind of got into the treadmill of taking care of me, it came back. And I refuse to ever, I refuse to ever lose it again.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're okay. But clearly you have a lot more work to do and to put the messages out there. I mean, what you're doing is amazing.
So when I was listening to your intuition grow, it just reminded me of how important that is and how it's really not taught, to your point. And it's not really taught to women to really know, we're taught, as you said, to be polite and to please, and that transition of you in the book. And I was like, that was a lesson in and of itself. That was a wonderful lesson to teach women to trust their intuition. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, at least for me, I think I use it with my kids. One's in Austin, the other one was in Boston, but there was a moment for me where my daughter said something to me, and I don't normally say to her, don't do this, but it just kept eating at me. And I just called her. She goes, okay, Mom, I get it. I won't do it. Same with my son, because rarely do I say, don't do something, or, but if something doesn't feel right to Mom, they know enough to know, okay, back off. We're not doing it.
Like you use intuition, that word, a lot, and you recognized it so clearly when you were listening to it, when you weren't listening to it. You always knew that you weren't following the guidance that was being given to you.
And if I look back, I think that came from a very early age. When I look back at my life, I was always getting signs. I just wasn't listening.
So now you got married twice, and you're rebuilding. So talk to us about that growth, that revelation, that change.
When, there's this, your emotional state affects your mental state. It also affects your physical state. And in my mid-20s, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And the doctor was from Australia. I still remember. And she looked at me. She goes, you're not going to take the medicine, are you? And you're not going to go to the support group, are you? I said, no. I had just graduated law school. I'm a lawyer, and there's no way, there's nothing wrong with me. And I chucked the medicine in the garbage. And then 5-6 years later, I was diagnosed with depression by a doctor. And I was just like, I'm not depressed. I've got 2 beautiful kids. I'm married. My marriage isn't great, but I love my job. I socialize. I do everything I'm supposed to be doing. There is no way I'm depressed. And in my mind, depression was you can't get out of bed. I didn't know that you could be depressed and still behave the way that I was behaving. And hindsight is 2020, because he's probably absolutely right. I was. And for me, after 6 months of taking the depression medication, I don't recommend this to anyone. I chucked it in the garbage, and I started to do yoga and meditation, where things started to become clear to me about my marriage, about what I was going through. But even after I got divorced, for me, it was the universe just literally brought me to my knees. I was at work one day, and I wasn't feeling well the prior days before that, but I was at work. My associate walked in and said, hey, can you get this for me? I don't know where it is. I went to try and get up off the chair, and I couldn't. I was paralyzed. Fast forward, I was wheelchaired into the hospital. I had a spinal tap that went wrong. And I was still arrogant enough to think it's not stress, and was on my BlackBerry, and the neurologist comes in, snatches it out of my hand and says, Poonam, if you don't stop, you're going to have a stroke. One would think that I would become humble at that point, but not me. I just looked at her. I'm like, I'm 38 years old. I'm not having a stroke, okay? And fast forward a year, I had one. And fast forward 2 years later, I had another one. When I was brought to my knees at that point, it was, I am not put on this forsaken earth to suffer. There is another meaning of life, and I'm going to figure it out. And for me personally, therapy didn't work. I was I felt like I was stuck. I needed somebody to teach me to move forward. So I found a spiritual guide, and I was listening and obviously pushing back because it's inherent in me to debate everything. You gotta, I have to debate everything just so that I get it. And we'd had some great conversations, and I'd walked away thinking about certain things. And I just didn't want to carry this weight of the world on my shoulders. I didn't want to feel angry, mad, and sad all the time. And I didn't want this facade that everything was okay, right? That I was a bulldog in my practice for my clients, but for myself internally, I was feeling such a lack of self-worth. And I was probably overcompensating in the workplace, but the negative chatter was going on. So for me, I think that's where it all started. And then obviously through that, dealing with my 4-prong SAFE method is what really got me to the other side. Sure. So I think the bottom premise is that we all want to feel emotionally safe, and we want to feel heard, whether you're a child, teenager, or adult. And we all want to feel validated in some way. So the process that I walk through to come out on the other side, the S stands for stop and acknowledge that you're in pain. We all go, like you said, on the hamster wheel. We continue life and pretend everything's okay. And when you suffer pain, when you don't deal with it the way you would with a broken arm, we go to the doctors, but for our emotional pain, we suffocate ourselves and shove it down. At some point, you become disassociated from who you are and disassociate yourself from that pain. And over the years, you become so far removed from it that you stop even feeling it. You don't even know what's going on. So the first part of the process, it can be as small as a friend of mine irritated me to as big as my sexual assault, to say that I am suffering and I acknowledge that I'm in pain. Until you acknowledge that you're in pain, and we get plenty of triggers, we're angry, mad, or sad, or crying for a reason, we just have to follow back and look at what those triggers are. When you acknowledge that you're in pain, that's when you can even begin the healing process. And that healing process can be anything that you want it to be. But acknowledging it is the biggest part. For me, it was literally dancing out in the basement and screaming at the top of my lungs and saying that I am in pain, and having Gloria Gaynor in the background saying that I will survive. I'm like, I am in pain. That was for me the healing stuff, the beginning of it. The A is accepting responsibility for where you are and the decisions that you've made. We're not always responsible for the things that have happened to us, but we are responsible for how we act towards them. So I was great at playing the victim. Everything was everybody else's fault. My parents, my siblings, my spouse, everybody had, my friends, my job, everybody was at fault except me. And what that does is, that victim mentality we become very comfortable with. It's easier to sit blaming the rest of the world because you don't need to do anything. You don't need to make a change. But the minute you start to accept responsibility, and that doesn't mean you're to blame, but responsibility, for instance, I should have stopped what was happening in my marriage a long time ago, but I didn't. And I didn't because I understand my low self-esteem, my lack of self-worth, the detest I had for myself. But my responsibility was I should have taken care of my emotions and my emotional work, and I did not. Everything in my marriage, I would love to sit here and say is 100% my ex-husband's fault. In my opinion, did he carry the weight of it? Yes, but I was also at fault with certain things. And in accepting that, you can only begin to make a change, right? When you accept responsibility and you accept that I am responsible for my emotional well-being. I'm responsible for this part in my marriage. I'm responsible for making this decision in my life because I didn't take care of my emotional well-being. Then you have no other choice but to make a change. And that change for me was spiritual work. It was meditation. It was journaling. It was getting in touch with myself. And I call it, in no perverse way, honeymooning with yourself and getting to know who you are. Because that, we're the pivot of everything around us. And if we don't know who we are, everything else will crumble in time. And the F is forgiveness. I talk about 3 types of forgiveness. Forgiveness of the people that you perceive have hurt you, forgiveness of the universe, and forgiveness of oneself. Often I used to think that forgiveness was something that a supreme power only had the power to do. And I used to sit there being angry, saying, well, I can't wait till this happens to so-and-so, which is such an awful thought. But not only that, but I'm killing myself and losing years of my own life in that process. And for a very selfish reason, I want to move forward. So I learned to forgive by humanizing the individual and empathizing in that maybe they had emotional trauma that nobody processed for them. They didn't know how to do it. So this is what came out. And humanizing them and saying, we're human beings, we all have flaws. And through a period of time, being able to forgive them. The forgiveness of the universe is we all sit here and say, why is this happening to me? Why does it always happen to me? What an awful thought as a fellow human being that we would want this pain inflicted upon someone else. The question should be, why not me? Perhaps I was handed these things down because I had lessons to learn. Perhaps in learning those lessons, I can now do what I'm doing today. And it's taken me a long time to understand that I wouldn't change anything that I went through in my life today because it's allowed me to help and heal other people, which to me is the most important thing. And the minute you stop seeing the universe as against you, but as part of your team, is when life starts to flow. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean I don't go through anything today, but I don't brood over it. And I know the universe has my back. And I can tell you, I quit a successful practice to do what I'm doing, making a lot less money, knowing that the universe has my back and will always have my back. That's how much faith I've begun to have. Forgiveness of oneself. We're kind to everybody else. We ask everybody else how they're doing, but we're very hard on ourselves. There's a lot of negative chatter. And I was extremely hard on myself. It took a long time for me to forgive myself and say, I did the best that I could with what I knew. I did the best that I could with where I was at that moment in time. And as long as I commit to being the better version of myself every single day, and as long as I do the work, I find it easier to forgive myself for the things that I did do wrong or the mistakes that I made. The E is embrace. Embrace our journey. We're all great at accepting the accolades about ourselves, but we need to start accepting our flaws. We need to start accepting the mistakes that we've made because that truly is what makes us who we are today. And and I can truly say today that I'm probably the most comfortable that I've ever been in my own skin. And very little things am I afraid of. And I'm probably the most confident that I've ever been because I've learned to embrace not just the good, but the mistakes too. And in doing that, we all need to embrace our emotional journey because I'm a true believer of that. Companies can give us all the resources that we want. We can have all the therapists available to us. But ultimately, it's like staying fit at the gym. There's no point having a gym in your building if you don't visit it and then complain, why am I not fit? Same way with our emotional work. I believe each and every single one of us as human beings have a responsibility to do our emotional work so that we become better leaders at work, better employees at work, and we become better partners, better parents, and better spouses and better siblings. Because until we all commit to doing that, we're never going to get rid of the generational trauma that is going on.
And that forgiveness of yourself is so important because again, it boils down to sometimes we don't know what we don't know. You don't, if you were ever taught what low self-esteem looks like, then you don't know you have it. You don't know that you're operating under that umbrella. So your book has quite a lot of valid, teachable lessons in it and identifiers, ways to identify things, just because I think that sometimes is more important than the teaching. You can't learn what you can't see that you need to see. If you're blinded to something, the lesson can be there, but you don't really see that it's for you, you know? So I think one of the things that I compliment your book for is that your transparency of your experience shows a problem or helps someone identify that situation within themselves, whether it's the fact that they are operating from low self-esteem. You might hear the word, but you don't know what it looks like. And then you're reading your book and you're hearing some of the things that you're talking about and you go, oh yeah, I can identify with that. Or it's not utilizing your intuition. Like, I've heard intuition. My mother says it, but it doesn't mean anything to you because you don't know what that looks like in order to operate in it. But you said very clearly what it looked like to you. I felt it in my gut. My heart knew it wasn't right. This knew it wasn't right. All of the things. I lost jewelry. You had these.
Alex, I forgot about.
You had these tangible things that were saying, look at me, you know. And we could call things superstitions. However, sometimes superstitions is just a way of getting us to pay attention, you know.
Well, Alice, you've just reminded me of something. When I got engaged in my first marriage, I lost my engagement ring for 2 days. When I got married in my second marriage, my wedding band fell off in the parking lot and I couldn't find it. I mean, there was signs across the board, but one thing that I loved about what you just said is we don't know that we have low self-esteem. So this particular image is clear as day for me. I was visiting a client at their client site. I was doing some kind of audit for them over a period of 8 months. When I started with them, I had just thought about filing for divorce or had filed for divorce. And I was with them for a period of, I think, 8 months to a year. And I would walk in once a week. I would do what I was doing. To me, I was confident, right? I mean, I was the one dictating what the client needs to do. I was the lawyer. I was confident in what I was doing. 8 months into it, I remember the secretary said to me, she said, there's something really different about you. And I said, what? She goes, you're just standing taller and you're more confident about the way that you're coming across. And I jokingly said to her, well, I just got divorced. That might have something to do with it. But it did have everything to do with it because I took a stand for myself.
Yeah. And that's what you show in the book, that we don't always know what we're going through.
No.
You know, hindsight is 20/20. But what you do in the book is show examples of what these different things could possibly look like. So if you're experiencing them in your life, this is what it is. This is what low self-esteem looks like. I remember the part in the book where you were still in England and you were, I think, having a meal with a friend. And he goes, don't you know you could get anybody that you want? And you're like, and I understood that not so much for myself, but because I had seen it in young girls, beautiful, smart, and they just put themselves down and they don't even understand that they are putting themselves down. It's just the way that they talk, or somebody else said something about them and they hold on to that. And that's how they describe themselves. So your lessons were very clear. If there's something that we didn't share that you would love for the audience to know.
So I have now transpired from the book. I have an emotionally safe course that is out there. I also do emotionally safe coaching for men and women. But I've also pivoted recently because I was at lunch with a dinner with a friend of mine, and I've saved a couple people's marriages, and I'm always coaching here, there, and everywhere. And I'm like, why have I not combined my emotionally safe method and my knowledge of divorce so that people can go into a divorce with clarity, knowing and feeling more empowered when they go meet with their attorney, in the hopes that it would reduce their legal fees because they're not paying $500 an hour to try and figure out what they should do. And also understand the side effects for the kids of being divorced. So I'm now combining my personal professional experience, and I'm doing what I call the divorce journey attorney. It's not legal advice, but it's for anybody that is thinking about divorce, during divorce, or post-divorce, on how to start the healing process, and even to start thinking about things, if you have children, how it affects them, how your custody arrangements affects them, because the easier you can come to resolutions or try and figure out what it is that you're doing, is the quicker that you can heal and move forward. So I'm combining the healing and the practicality of being divorced in a coaching program as well. Okay. And all this is on my website. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
I thank you for sharing your journey, and I thank you for sharing the lessons. And I would love to be able to work with you again on another project.
Oh, I would look forward to that. And it's an absolute pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would like to say thank you to Poonam Bhuchar for joining us today. Please pick up a copy of her book, Safe from the Pain, and check out her website for details on her coaching program. This has been Read This, Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice Maria James. Keep reading, keep growing, and stay empowered.